Hello my friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Shailene Louise and I teach watercolor tutorials and drawing tutorials over on Patreon and here on YouTube. Today I am going to be walking you through how I paint this red cardinal. So I got started by just doing a wash of cadmium red over the entire body of this little bird here. If you want the sketch to this Cardinal, head over to the link in the description. It's over on Patreon, and I'll give you a free sketch download for you to use as you paint along with me. So I feel like birds are just they're kind of tricky to draw freehand. Definitely possible, but it just kind of takes me a little while to really get the shape right. I think that's sort of what's the trickiest part about birds, is getting the shape right. So if you want to follow that sketch, you're welcome to. So yeah, that's patreon.com/Shailene Louise. The specific link is below. So getting back to this painting here, what I did was I just kind of did a solid layer of color, and then while the paint was still wet, I just kind of went around with that cadmium red and just dropped it in just a little bit more. And the water that's kind of on this paper helps to sort of take that paint and smooth it out, feather it out just a little bit while it's still wet. So something about watercolor is that it always dries just a little bit lighter than you expect. So I always teach to paint in layers. And so I slowly, gradually add layer by layer to add a darker, richer color. So now with these wings, I grabbed a little bit more of this mix. I have cadmium red and Winsor red. So I kind of mixed them both just because I like to use more than just one color. I like to kind of use a cool red, which is Winsor red, and a little bit of a warmer red, which is cadmium red, kind of almost like an orange red. So I'm kind of just drawing these long lines, these feather lines. And then I'm going to use this wet brush and just kind of smooth that color out just a little bit. I never like to have really hard lines. I kind of try to keep it all soft, especially at the beginning. Towards the end, I'll add more detail, but I like to work kind of keeping things soft and then adding all of the fine details at the end. And just a note here on supplies, I'm using a size 6 round brush, and I'm also using a size 0 round brush. So as you can see, I'm kind of working on his cute little head here, and I'm using that very, very fine brush to paint those little feathery, wispy lines. I generally like to work with at least 2 brushes, something that holds a lot of water, and then something that's a little bit on the smaller side that I can do some of those fine details with. So as my painting dries, I just kind of come back and add some of those little details, add some of the shading, especially around the edges. So underneath his breast, on his belly there, I'm really trying to add some depth there. So I actually did a mix here with just a little bit of burnt sienna, so kind of a darker rusty red color. Both of the reds I have, Winsor red and cadmium red, are both a little bit on the lighter. They're not dark colors. As you can see on my palette, it's kind of a mid-tone value. So adding some burnt sienna helps to get a really, really dark, rich shade of red. You can also mix in a little bit of brown with your red if you want to get a darker red. But yes, in general, red is not super, super dark. So if you want to add some really dark reds, you got to kind of mix it with a different color. So I'm just really trying to build up some of these values. As I mentioned, watercolor, it dries kind of lighter, so I just have to keep on going, keep adding a little bit more shading, a little bit more color, and then going in with this damp brush to kind of smooth out what I did. Okay, so then I'm going to paint his little face. So I am using a little bit of indigo and a little bit of burnt umber? I think that's what I'm using. Burnt umber and a little bit of indigo. And so it's kind of creating a black color. And what I'm trying to be mindful of is keeping a little ring of white around his eye, as well as keeping a little kind of a reflective spot in the upper corner of his eye. And that just gives it some dimension. It kind of makes it look like his eye is wet. It makes it look like it just kind of doesn't feel like he just has this black hole of an eye. So using my very small brush, the size 0 brush, I'm just layering on that color very carefully. I think this one's a size 0 brush. That's my guess. A lot of my brushes, I use them so much that I can't even see what size they are anymore. But it's not that important. Just, I think a lot of times I think a better way to label my brushes is just big brush, small brush, and we'll just keep it at that. So I do have a little white gel pen. As you can see, I tried to drop it in there just a little bit when I felt like I added too much black around his eyes. I can link what that gel pen is below in the description, but I really love using that for little details. It lays on really nicely over watercolors. So for his beak, I did a little bit of cadmium red with a little bit of yellow to sort of just give a nice orange color. If you have orange watercolor paint, just go ahead and grab that, paint his beak orange. So it's more of a true orange than the rest of his body. The rest of his body is more of an orangey red, and his beak is just kind of a true orange. So some of the last details I'm going to do for his wings here is adding some of that brown color over to my red, and then adding just kind of these lines just to kind of accentuate, add a bit more definition to his wings, and then here to like the back of his neck. Just needs a little bit more texture, a little bit more definition, I think. I'm now using that color to just kind of go around his face, add just some little wispy lines, just these little tiny details. This small brush is really wonderful for adding all of these little fine details. Yeah, I feel like you can overdo it with a bird painting. Sometimes it's nice to kind of keep it more on the simple side. I was kind of torn with this one if I wanted to make it more of a loose painting or make him more detailed. I think I maybe erred on the side of making this painting a little bit more detailed. I don't know if erred is the right word, but I decided I wanted this one to be just a little bit more detailed. So you can see I'm really working some of these details, adding some depth, some details to his feathers, adding just these little dash marks around his face, on his breast, along his tail feathers there as well. And I also kind of use my watercolors just to really shape his, you can see I'm doing it right here, to shape his back, to shape his belly, and just really make sure that that feels kind of accurate and like a nice natural bird shape, if you know what I mean. So for his little legs here, I am using some, I believe I used a little bit of yellow ochre, and bird feet in my opinion, bird feet can be kind of, I feel like I kind of overthink it. So I tried to just keep it simple and not overthink the bird feet. And so I just did yellow ochre. I put a little bit of cadmium red in his legs as well. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and get started by mixing. Well, actually, let me finish his face here. I have to just kind of shape his face as I go. I love Cardinal's hairs, that their little cute heads. Just a little bed head, so cute. So for the branch, I go ahead and mix some indigo with a little bit of burnt umber. So it's going to kind of create a gray color, which is what I want. I don't want the branch to be too brown. I think that's a mistake I often make with branches and trees, is to make the bark or the branches too brown. Whereas if you look in reality, in nature, you're going to see that even in summer, you know, usually branches are kind of actually more on the gray side with definitely some brown in them. They're warm, but I think the sun kind of, you know, bleaches them a little bit, so they always look a little bit more gray. So anyways, I'm trying to just be loose in this application. I don't want to try and make the branch too perfectly detailed. It's not really the focus here. The focus is on the bird. But as I work on this, I kind of will use that same mixture to go in and articulate his little talons, his little feet, and the branch as well. So I'm just kind of using that same color of indigo with a little bit of brown, and then just adding that color to both his legs and to the branches. For his legs, I try to keep them more on the warm side. So more like adding a little bit more yellow to his legs, and then keeping the branch more of that gray color. I try to really add some of the darker value to the bottom side so that it kind of looks like it's maybe in shadow just a little bit. So make the bottom of your branch just a little bit darker than the top side. So these are my last little details here, just adding a little bit more definition to his feet and to the branch, but I think I like how this one is filling today, so I will stop here. If you enjoyed this tutorial, I have lots of other ones over on Patreon, patreon.com/ShaileneLouise. You can find all the classes there. You don't even have to become a patron. You can just buy classes individually there. But I also have a ton of videos available here on YouTube. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Thanks so much for being here.